Tonight, breaking news, another twist in the secret Afghan data breach saga. Now it's revealed that British spies and special forces were included in the leak. Well, the leak happened back in 2022, and now we're being told that 100 serving and former members of UK special forces and security services were caught up in it. Another big breaking news story tonight. Diane Abbott has been suspended from the Labour Party for a second time. We'll bring you the latest. Also tonight, the biggest changes to the electoral system since 1969, as Labour announces 16 and 17-year-olds will be able to vote in all UK elections, starting with the next general election. Plus, talks to try and stop a 5-day walkout by resident doctors in England have broken up this evening. We'll have the latest on how they've gone. Plus, Donald Trump is proudly trumpeting that he's helped get the ingredients for a well-known fizzy drink changed. We're going to be taking a closer look at his cola obsession. Fizzing with opinions and chat tonight, Sam Shah and Caroline Flint will be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, look, we've got a couple of big breaking political stories happening tonight. It's going to be a busy show, and I just want to start by bringing you up to date with the first one. So this is the massive Afghan data leak that's dominated headlines over the last few days, and it's now been revealed that 100 British nationals were included in that list, including MI6 spies and people working for the British SAS and special forces as well. So to get more on this story, we can talk now to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who can bring us up to date with the latest. John, another twist in the story.
Yes, and this follows yet another court hearing in the High Court, actually, where this has all been discussed by the lawyers, have been talking more super injunctions. And in fact, I know you've been talking to Lucy Powell, the leader of the Commons, and she's actually said that there is, in fact, another injunction, she says. She says that it's subject to an additional injunction. She said she wasn't aware of it. But she did say that the names have not been made public. So that's the government trying to reassure people. But what we've learned today is that spies, special forces, soldiers, senior military personnel, they were among the tens of thousands of people potentially put at risk by this data leak. Now, it includes MI6 spies, members of the SAS, MPs, government ministers and other senior military figures. Now, in the Commons, in his big statement on Tuesday, I think it was, wasn't it, John Healey said that, yes, indeed, in a small number of cases, he said, there were MPs, senior military officers and government officials who were supporting the application. What he means by that, backing the applications for the Afghans fleeing the Taliban, the people who've been helping British and Western forces in Afghanistan. Now, as you might expect, the clamour, the calls for a public inquiry are growing. In Prime Minister's questions yesterday, Sir Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, said he'd back a public inquiry into this, not just the leak, but of course the cover-up. That, in many ways, a lot of MPs think the cover-up is just as scandalous as the leak. They don't like gagging orders, MPs. But a short time ago, we heard from Helen Maguire. Now, she is a newish Lib Dem MP. She is a former captain in the Royal Military Police, served in Bosnia. Anyway, she's now the Lib Dem's defence spokesperson. This was her talking to Sky News a short time ago, stepping up the demands for a full public inquiry.
We'll be looking for an inquiry into all elements of what has happened here. So basically, both the data leak and the injunction into this, and also to provide recommendations as to what the MOD needs to do moving forwards to make sure that incidents like this simply don't happen again.
But it's not just the Lib Dems. They haven't yet called for the recall of Parliament because, of course, Parliament hasn't broken up yet. But Lord Beamish, now that's Kevan Jones to you and me. Kevan Jones, former crusading Labour MP, big on the Horizons scandal and Post Office and so on. He chairs the Intelligence and Security Committee. That's that quite secretive committee of senior MPs and peers. Now, he's on the warpath tonight because he says that his committee were kept in the dark about all this. He's saying that they should be provided with information so they can have an inquiry. Tan Desai, who chairs the Commons Defence Select Committee, said they're going to have inquiry. And one other development today, James Heapy, the former Armed Forces Minister, who was named by John Healey in the Commons this week, along with Ben Wallace, as the Tory ministers who were involved in this super injunction. He's broken his silence today. He said it was gut-wrenching to find out someone in the MOD had, as he put it, screwed up so awfully. Now, he said the individual was incredibly dedicated to those we served with in Afghanistan. So somebody known to the Ministry of Defence. Now, the other night, John Healey said, has that person been fired? And the answer was, well, you know, that person's been moved to somewhere else in the civil service. And Mr. Healey also said, when he was asked, would you, if necessary, go for another super injunction? He said, never say never. So more injunctions possibly on the way. OK, John, thanks very much. And stay with us, because I do just want to bring in our duo for the evening at this point, the former Conservative Special Advisor Starmer Shah and the former Labour Minister Caroline Flynn. I mean, both of you so interested on this, you know, with your experience in the Home Office. But Caroline, you were just saying that you were on the Intelligence and Security Committee.
Yeah, I actually served with Kevin Jones when he was an MP as well. And, you know, very often the committee, it meets in camera. You know, it's very protected in terms of the information that we have access to. It's a privilege. It's done in a very secure way. But also, it's, you know, you do get the opportunity to hear information that they want to let both peers and MPs, because it's peers and MPs that sit on this committee, aware of what's happening. And I couldn't believe this week when Ben Wallace, on an interview, when asked about why they hadn't actually at least gone to the Intelligence Security Committee in camera, privately, to at least let them know what was going on, seemed to suggest that because MOD intelligence only went there voluntarily and he made something up about they're not quite, the oversight of them isn't quite the same. That seems a really weak, a lacking excuse for not taking that action at that time. Penny Morton, actually on the programme this week, has also said it should have gone to the ISA. Absolutely, 100%. And as whoever it is that's, you know, was responsible for whatever it was, pressing the button and sharing the data, I mean, it raises massive issues, doesn't it, around, you know, very sensitive data, and that those people handling, do they know what they're doing? I mean, apart from the lives that have been put at risk here, including agents that are there to support our country's interest. Salma.
Well, I agree. I mean, Ben Wallace isn't wrong. It doesn't have a direct link with military and defence, the Intelligence and Security Committee. However, it does then beg the question, when something like this does happen, and you can argue that a super injunction was necessary for protection of various people, I think I would accept that. But it's the secretive nature where there is absolutely no scrutiny on this decision and the way that it's come out. I think it poses a lot of questions about how we go forward. And as we've just heard, you know, John Healey hasn't ruled out using super injunctions in the future. If that's the case, where would be the governance and the protection if you don't want it out in the media because lives are going to be at risk? But there has to be some measure of scrutiny. One of the criticisms made by many MPs is that super injunctions are often quite temporary, aren't they? They don't last very long. And this one was in force for, what, 2-3 years? Yeah. Too long, some MPs say.
Yeah, it feels like maybe there's a difference in people's attitude towards the first super injunction, like, whereas, like, OK, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then the decision to extend it and to keep it going.
I think that's absolutely right. I think timing, the amount of time is really important in this discussion, but also, you know, given that, you know, it ended up being a very large list of people, you know, how much... A lot of people who absolutely deserve to be given refuge in this country. I mean, that clear. Well, I don't know enough about all these other people, whether they were vetted and what happened and whether they actually really should be here. And set against the climate of, under the last government and continuing this government, immigration and everything else, it's another optic that just plays into that concern of the public.
Exactly, and that's why you have to have some semblance of scrutiny, and it doesn't feel like you're backfilling because somebody's made an error of judgment. But there's something much deeper here, which is the idea of Whitehall not being scrutinised correctly, and that somehow, if we have a huge problem with trust in institutions, which everybody talks about, this absolutely, for anybody who's watching at home, will probably confirm or underline the fact that there's one rule for them and another rule for us.
Really interesting debate. Thanks all very much indeed, and thanks, John, as well. And, of course, the latest on the Afghan data leak is sure to feature in tomorrow's papers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the political commentator Tim Montgomery and the journalist and author Rachel Shabby. OK, I want to get the latest now on the other big breaking political story tonight, which is that Diane Abbott has been suspended from the Labour Party pending an investigation into comments she made about racism. Well, our political correspondent Liz Bates joins us now. Liz, just talk us through this story. What's happened?
Yes, Sophie. Well, first of all, I mean, we've been expecting this, I think, all day, but we've had confirmation from a Labour Party spokesperson this evening. Diane Abbott has been suspended, not for the first time, from the Labour Party pending an investigation. So it'll be a while until we find out what is going to happen to Diane in the future. Now, this dates back to a 2023 letter that she wrote to The Observer in which Diane Abbott described different levels of experiencing racism and prejudice, and she said that it was different for Jewish people who experienced a type of prejudice, and she compared that to the type of prejudice that people with red hair, ginger people, might experience. So those were the original comments. Now, the Labour Party were not very happy about that at the time. This was in the wake of a lot of the difficulties that they had around anti-Semitism. She was suspended then. There was a very long investigation. In the end, she apologised. In fact, I think she apologised quite early on, but then the investigation went on for quite a long time. I think that really, coming up to the general election, they hoped that she would not stand as a Labour MP. There was a big standoff between them. She stood as a Labour MP. She's been causing trouble for them ever since. As you might expect, not a big fan of Keir Starmer. Now, today, this is from a BBC interview that actually dates back a few months, but today these comments have come out. These are her latest comments. She's doubled down on that Observer letter. She says, clearly, there must be a difference between racism, which is about colour, and other types of racism, because you can see a traveller or a Jewish person walking down the street, you don't know. I just think that it's silly to try and claim that racism, which is about skin colour, is the same as other types of racism. I don't know why people would say that. So that is why she has been suspended again. Now, of course, this comes in a sort of a context, which is that Keir Starmer, over the last couple of days, has been trying to impose discipline on his party. 4 MPs suspended for a completely different issue, which is disloyalty, speaking out on things like the welfare bill, the winter fuel payment, voting against the government. You see them there. We have heard from the Prime Minister on that issue. Let's hear what Keir Starmer had to say on that.
In 1997, when 47 MPs voted against Tony Blair's welfare plans, not a single one had the whip removed. He, like you, had a massive majority, but unlike you, he just didn't feel the need to punish MPs. Why are you so rattled by this? Doesn't it look weak?
Look, we were elected in to change this country for the better. And that means we've got to carry through that change, and we've got to carry through reforms, because we inherited a broken economy and broken public services. No government has inherited both of those ever before, and I'm determined that we will change this country for the better for millions of working people. And I'm not going to be deflected from that. Therefore, we had to deal with people who repeatedly break the whip, because everyone was elected as a Labour MP on the manifesto of change, and everybody needs to deliver as a Labour government. This is about what we're doing for the country, and that's why I'm so determined to press forward with the reforms and the change that we need to bring about.
Well, Liz is still here. We've also got, of course, Sam and Caroline with us too. Look, I think it's important to kind of differentiate these 2 suspensions. I think, Diane Abbott and the other 4 MPs. Salman, what do you make of the kind of breaking news on Diane Abbott tonight?
Well, it's quite difficult because, as Liz has just pointed out, this is sort of a long-running saga. So it's not specifically about Diane and the comments that she made, because we know that she was allowed to stand as a Labour MP. And so there are some elements of it that do feel slightly cynical, and there's a clampdown and perhaps a little bit of anxiety coming from Number 10 about how they're starting to discipline the parliamentary party. But I don't want to get into the specificity of what Diane said in the issue, because, I will have a lot of disagreement with her on that. But really, this is about how that plays with party discipline. And, the fact that we are talking about this concept that's parliamentary of disloyalty to the party whip, you know, there are a lot of people who would say that those 4 MPs actually stood up for them when it came to the welfare cuts. That there is a really deeper question about how much loyalty backbench MPs actually feel to this government and the ticket that they were elected on and the mandate that they were given by their manifesto.
Caroline, what's your take on, like, firstly on Diane? Do you think that, you know, it was a sort of slightly cynical move, or do you think that actually they don't really have a choice on this?
I thought it was really interesting listening to Liz and reminding us of the what was said at the time, and now it just I forgot about the ginger hair, to be honest, Liz. So, you know, thank you for putting that in context there. I think also, if I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, is at the time there was some question about whether a member of staff had drafted the letter or something like that.
I think it was described by her as it was a draft, it was a mistake,
exactly.
and she did withdraw it and apologise.
So she did do that. She was suspended for nearly a year. I mean, it did run up into the general election. I was thinking about this earlier. Probably they thought Jeremy Corbyn's standing, we might lose against him. I think there probably was some thoughts going through their minds that if Diane stood as an independent in 2024, similar would happen there. What I don't get with the situation, and I think Starmer's right about they're looking at everything she said, she's going to have to explain what's gone on here, is why she seems to have doubled down. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, I understand, who actually supported Diane being brought back into the Parliamentary Labour Party, has raised her concerns that she feels actually Diane's almost gone backwards on her apology from before. And what does she mean? And there's lots of discussions we can have about the form in which racism takes, how it affects black people, how it affects Jewish people, travellers and others. But, you know, when you're on the receiving end of racism, you know you're on the receiving end of racism. And I think, again, the anti-Semitism issue is what we've seen that such a huge rise in acts and of anti-Semitism against Jewish people in this country and elsewhere. And again, that was a context of what was also happening last time round and is happening even more today, with obviously everything being heightened by the situation in Gaza and Israel.
Specifically on the other 4, if you like, which is, I think, perhaps a more sort of straightforward discipline issue, if you like. Do you think, Starmer, that actually Number 10 had to make some kind of statement to prevent, I guess, you know, other MPs doing the same thing again, rebelling again and thwarting legislation?
No, this really is classic poor party management. So they think what they're doing is setting down this marker and being really tough and showing them that, oh, God, you know, we're going to be on the naughty step for a little while. What does that actually mean with a parliamentary majority that is so vast that actually a lot of legislation can go through, but also so weak in terms of its shallowness in the popular vote that people feel compelled to be able to raise issues individually? The issue around welfare is perhaps of a lack of party management and good communication with backbench MPs. And again, I go back to this point of what's in the manifesto, what was the mandate, how strongly does the connection feel between the backbench of the Labour Party and Number 10? And if the Chief Whip does not get a grip on this, I mean, that's the person that really is going to have to work out this party management, and you allow it to happen from Number 10 that is slightly detached from Parliament and all its sort of idiosyncrasies, then you're going to keep going down this thing. And the worst thing about it for Keir Starmer is that he is going to look weak and it is going to look like a shambles all of the time.
I think also in the environment of this is a context situation as well, is that, you know, decision was made when they first came in after the general election around the winter fuel payment, which they were solidly going to keep to. The local elections happened and there was obviously people saying it was the winter fuel payment. I think it was other things as well. We haven't got long enough to go into that. Yeah. But they backtracked on that and then they went into this massive... Look, we all know that amongst Labour members and Labour MPs, whenever, even under Tony, and we saw that in the report, when we start to look at reforming welfare, it's hard. And the thing is that the ground for that wasn't prepared. I think the Rebels were wrong because I think they talk about, oh, we need to make change, but they never come up with any ideas. But again, there's a difference in style here. Tony Blair had a big majority. He had to win the argument and get the majority and get the reforms through. Let's not give oxygen to 4 people who maybe don't deserve it.
OK, really interesting chat. Thanks very much, and thanks, Liz, as well. Now, 16 and 17-year-olds are going to be able to vote in UK elections in perhaps the biggest shake-up of the voting system since 1969. Now, there's going to be loads of analysis about who the biggest winners and losers are in political terms, so it's basically most likely to benefit parties on the left, so the Greens, the Labour Party, although I do also wonder if it might actually end up helping Reform further leapfrog the Conservatives as well, because even though their voters skew older, they're more popular among young people than the Conservatives are. But forgetting the political who's up and who's down for a moment, because the most important thing that could be impacted by votes for 16-year-olds is policies. Because look, we all know that political parties are all about chasing votes, and that means they'll focus on policies that are going to help them win an election. Older voters vote more, so it's no surprise we've got the triple lock. Winter fuel payments are here to stay, pensioner poverty is falling, while child poverty is rising. So will enfranchising millions of young voters mean we get more policies around helping renters or apprenticeships, schools and universities? And of course, I guess the way to make that happen is all about whether people use their vote or not, because it's not about who can vote, it's about who does vote. Let's get the latest now, shall we? Here's our people and politics correspondent, Nick Martin.
The decision to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to have their say in elections prompted quite a debate among these politics students at a school in North London.
I think as a concept, it's quite a positive thing because it does increase representation for younger voters.
I talked to some of my classmates and they are not politically involving themselves and they don't have any political intelligence on purpose, and that's worrying.
I think it's about time. The voting age in Scotland is 16 to 17 and the voter turnout and how it's worked out there has only been improving ever since they introduced it.
I feel like it was correct having it at 18 because that's when you turn and become an adult.
It's really good for us to be able to have a say in policies and laws that ultimately affect our lives.
Traditionally, you see younger voters, 18 to 24, mainly voting for more left-wing parties like Labour. But the rise of Reform and its use of social media definitely could be helped by this 16, 17-year-old cohort.
It is a major piece of electoral reform, but not a surprising one. It was, after all, a Labour manifesto promised before the last election that could change the shape of the next one.
If at the age of 16 you can work, pay taxes, join the army, there's no reason why young people should not have the right to participate in our democracy, choose who their representatives are, and shape the future of our country through the democratic process.
It's more than half a century since the last time the voting age was lowered. Labour PM Harold Wilson thought that reducing the voting age to 18 would help the party. Labour was, he said, the party of youth. And if the youth vote was significant then, it didn't quite work out for Labour, as a year later the Conservatives won the 1970 general election. The government have described this as the biggest change to democracy in a generation. But all political parties now will be vying for the votes of 16 and 17-year-olds as a new battleground has opened up. But the truth is, some political parties are off to a head start. Reform, led by Nigel Farage, have 6 times as many followers on TikTok than Labour does, and potentially they have the power to tap in to a new generation of voters.
If you look back at last year's general election, we've had a go at trying to project how it would have shifted the vote shares based on how we know young people generally vote. And what we find is that we're talking about movements in decimal points here. We're not talking about radical change. The Tories would be down a little bit. Labour and the Greens would have been up a little bit. But in an era of multi-party politics, where seats are won on very small shares of the vote, those small movements can have an outsized impact.
It's thought the change to the voting age could inject another 10 million voters into the system. Winning them over could be the key to power. Nick Martin, Sky News.
Right, let's chat this, shall we? Sam Shah and Karen Flint are still with us, of course, plus our, as for magic, our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, has appeared in the chair as well. And I'm also pleased to say we really are spoiled tonight. We are joined from Manchester by Rob Ford, who is a Professor of Political Science at the University of Manchester. So lots of opinions on this, but it's a big moment. It really does feel like that way. Sam, I want to come to you first, actually. So just talk to me first about the votes at 16. What's going on?
Look, there is enormous symbolism here. The last time that the voting age changed was in 1969. That was when it dropped from 21 to 18. It's going to spark a national conversation about when you're an adult. Look, you can now vote at 16 once this change goes through. You can't buy a lottery ticket or drink alcohol or actually fight in a war. So I think the age of maturity is a kind of topic that a lot of people get stuck into. Actually, it's not terribly popular as a policy when you look at the polling. But will it make an enormous impact? Well, as you heard from Luke Trill there, and as YouGov, who we often partner with, would say, I'm not sure that this change is going to really shift the dial when it comes to election. It is a great talking point, however. That's kind of my point, because the government have done a lot today to change the way elections work and happen, and they've given us one thing to talk about, but there's an awful lot else that they've slipped in.
You've teased us here. What else should we be talking about as well?
There's a huge, long wish list for many people in the Labour Party has been released today. Let me give you a few highlights. Automatic registration. So at the moment, you have to register to vote. It's generally thought if you make it easier to vote, then maybe Labour will benefit. Well, they've put in place a system to make that happen as of today. Secondly, you'll remember the controversy around ID at voting stations, polling stations. Well, they've made that easier as well. Bank cards are going to be able to be used as ID if you go and vote. And then there's a biggie. You might remember earlier this year, there was fears in Labour circles in particular that maybe Elon Musk might give huge sums to the Reform UK, to Nigel Farage's party, perhaps via his UK Tesla companies or through some method like that. Now, foreigners are not meant to be able to donate in the UK, but if you have a company in the UK, there's something of a loophole. It looks as if they might try and change that loophole, and the only companies that generate income in the UK can give money to political parties in future. That, if it happens, and they are promising today to change the rules to make that happen, is a massive change to how our system of politics works by stamping out foreign donations that can come in through the back door. Those are things that I've just listed, which I think are of bigger significance. Certainly, I don't think 16, 17-year-olds will massively move the dial. The things I've just listed, well, they might.
That's really interesting to get that context. It really is. Let's bring in Rob at this point, shall we? Rob Ford, zooming in for us. Sam was just saying that he doesn't think that it's necessarily going to move the dial, giving 16 and 17-year-olds the vote. What's your take on it?
Well, I agree with Sam. I think his point's also about the other things being more significant and very astute. I'll come on to those in a minute. But in terms of 16 to 17-year-olds, there's just not really enough of them, and they're too evenly spread, and they're probably not likely enough to vote in very large numbers to make a great deal of difference. Now, we had an awful lot of very tightly contested seats last time, so they could make a difference at the margins. And from the party's perspective, the other value of 16 and 17-year-olds is they're relatively easy to find because they tend to live with their parents. So from a perspective of mobilising voters, it has some advantages. But what we're talking about are very small incremental differences. I think much of the discussion about this is quite rightly focused on the principles of when is it the right point to allow people to participate in our democracy, because the horse race impacts are just not very big.
That's interesting. Well, let's talk about the principle then. Salma, Caroline, where are your heads at on this? Is it a good idea?
I don't support it.
Interesting.
No, I'm glad there's three things I do support, which were the three that Sam outlined. Automatic recognition, stop the foreign donors' backdoor entry, and I think simplifying the ID thing at polling stations are all good ideas.
How come you don't support it?
In fact, it was, I think Ed Miliband wanted it when he was leader. It was one of the policies going back then. And the reason why I don't support it, because I do think it's about the age of maturity. I mean, I think the Labour government under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown put loads of things in to stop 16-year-olds doing stuff. You know, you couldn't buy a knife, you couldn't buy butane gas, you couldn't do this, couldn't that. And there's a whole load of things where, for lots of good reasons, we don't apply the same measure of adulthood to 16-year-olds as we do when they're 18. You can't even learn to drive a car for most 16-year-olds unless you have a mobility disability, and then there's an exception to that. I also spent my time as an MP often going into schools asking young people what they thought about it. I have to say, most of the time it was like majority of young people between 16 and 18 would say, no, they shouldn't give it to 16-year-olds and so on. I agree with Rob. I think in the big scheme of things about having policies that are directed at the younger age range of our populations is not going to be affected by this at all. I've just come from a seminar this morning on housing, so I don't think that's going to make any impact. But also, we are increasingly having a larger segment of the population over 50, and they have a whole load of things that they will vote for, which will maybe not be affected by the 16-year-olds vote being brought in. I think the other thing for Labour needs to be aware of, on this issue, some polling I saw, the public were against it, a majority, but also a majority of the public seemed to think that Labour was only doing this for not democracy, but really just sorting out votes for themselves, and that's not good. That's not a good optic.
I could see Rob nodding along there. Rob, do you agree with a bit what Caroline was saying there then?
Yeah, I'm not sure why voters are against it, but it is a little bit of a remarkable irony that Labour have landed upon and worked into their manifesto, which is, of course, the other reason they're doing this. It's a manifesto commitment. Yeah. One of the few sort of democratic reforms that consistently receives majority opposition from the public. There are an awful lot of people who are in favour of. They're in favour of the other things on the list that Sam's mentioned and Caroline's mentioned, but Votes at 16 has consistently shown majority opposition. So it's...
I was going to say, listen, I cannot add anything more intelligent to what has already been said by, esteemed people in the studio and down the line. But what I can tell you is that there is a bunch of mothers out there who've got 16-year-olds thinking, oh, God, there's another thing I've got to drag them out of bed for and say, have you remembered to vote? My God, have you registered to vote? Don't forget to do the voting. And that's why people are consistently against it, because there is an age of maturity thing. And I can just feel sort of the blood pressure rising amongst a cohort of my friends thinking, God, another thing I'm going to have to sort out.
Yeah, we should raise the age, shouldn't we?
Yeah,
really?
we should
Let's
raise it. 25. When you get a mortgage.
I want to just take through some of the viewer comments, because we've been getting a few through on our Politics Hub blog. And you know what? There are some people, I should say, who disagree with our esteemed panel. Here's Ben. Superb idea. People who are more part of the future than others given the chance to share their opinions. And Nellie agrees. She says, I think it's a brilliant idea to let 16-year-olds vote. They're our future. There you go, not us guys with a pass, so there you go. A lot of people can't be bothered voting, which is a disgrace. But then if you look at Jim, he says giving children the vote is absolute desperation from Labour to ensure they retain their majority. So perhaps picking up there on the point that Caroline was saying, that some people are viewing this as basically opportunistic from Labour. Paula says absolutely ridiculous allowing children to vote when they can't drink, drive or smoke, and most are still at school. There is just one last one that I did want to bring you, if possible, as well, because Susie says, she's 20, by the way, and she says, with how influential social media has become in this generation, I fear that more impressionable teenagers will be manipulated by digital propaganda. Something needs to be done about that first. Social media is rife with misinformation and manipulation. I just want to pick up on that.
That's a good point.
Because that, I think, is a really interesting point. And I'm very aware that we shouldn't say that younger people are more likely to be manipulated online than older people, because, to be honest, I just don't think that's the case. But, I just think there is perhaps something here about digital targeting.
That's right. I think the interesting thing about this is that younger people consume media in different platforms to older people. Bluntly, look, we're looking at TikTok, Instagram, you're looking a bit at Snapchat. There will be a completely different debate in one part of the public sphere to the one... And I don't know yet whether this is a good or a bad thing. It's just going to be something that we'll watch on Sky News. It could be the case that politicians are able to face both ways and, indulge one set of beliefs and then contradict them in another platform because people don't notice. Or it might mean that there's a more engaged debate on the terms that people want.
Genuinely, I could continue this for a long time because I think there's some really, really interesting issues and talking points, and it's been great to get all of you on, and Rob as well. But I did want to bring you some breaking news, because we do need to pause for a moment because there is a big developing story that we're keeping track of on Sky News here tonight. Because a major incident's been declared after a coach bringing children back from a school trip crashed in Somerset this afternoon. Emergency services are still working to free pupils from the vehicle. Police say that it reportedly left the road around 7 miles away from Minehead, and we're told the coach was carrying 60 to 70 passengers from a middle school day trip. Now, Avon and Somerset Police say they can confirm a number of casualties have been conveyed to hospital. And I should say, of course, we will have more on this over the course of the evening as soon as we get it. We'll update you, of course, on any more news we get about that crash. But a little bit earlier, just before the news, I should say, on Diane Abbott broke, I spoke to the leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell, started by asking her about those changes around voting in elections. Thank you so much for being on the programme today. The first thing that I do want to talk to you about, just briefly, if I may, is this story that more than 100 Brits were included in this data leak from Afghanistan. What's your comments on this?
Well, obviously, it's very concerning, as this was subject to an additional injunction, it's not something I was aware of either. But I think the first thing I would just say is to reassure you and your viewers that the names themselves have now not been made public. But I think this is just further evidence of how serious this incident was and why we've had to take the steps over many months that we've had to take since the Secretary of State has asked for a review with a view to lifting the injunction to make sure that it was perfectly safe for him to get to that point. And that's why it's taken some time for that review to happen, so that we could be sure that there would be no security risks from lifting the injunction. But as he has said, and as the Prime Minister has said, as a government, we are deeply uncomfortable and concerned by the fact that the public and Parliament have been kept in the dark about this issue, and that's why we took the steps that we've taken to get the injunction lifted. And clearly there are many, many questions here about how this data leak happened, what were the consequences of it, what actions were taken as a result, and what procedures and policies have been put in place to make sure that that would never happen again.
Yeah, so many questions, as you say, and I'm sure it's a story that there's going to be more fallout from in the coming days and weeks as well. You've announced today that 16 and 17-year-olds are going to be able to vote in UK elections. Only 8 other countries in the world do this. So just explain why you think it is a good idea.
Well, this was a manifesto commitment that we had, and it's been a Labour policy for a while, and the reason that it is a Labour policy is because young people around the country for many years have been campaigning for it, because they want the right to vote, because they want their views and their concerns and their futures to be considered by politicians and governments of the future, and that's why they've been calling for it. And I think if you're
just on that,
old
if I may,
enough
because
to
you
serve
mentioned
in the army,
you mentioned there about how they feel that they've been campaigning for it because they feel that some of their concerns haven't been recognised by politicians. And it does feel, you know, obviously older people are more likely to vote, so we have seen a focus on things like the pensions triple lock, for example, pension and poverty falling while child poverty rising. Do you think that, I guess, politicians have not been taking young people seriously because they don't have the vote?
Well, I think that that's inevitably the case. You know, you're targeting, as political parties, as politicians, you're targeting people who do vote with the policies that you are pushing forward. And I think this in part, giving 16 and 17-year-olds the vote and extending the franchise to more young people, you know, I really hope will ensure that young people's concerns and futures are taken into account by those campaigning for their votes, and they will have to be. And I think if you can join the army... Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, I was going to say that, you know, it's going to help Labour as well, right? Most popular party among 16 and 17-year-olds.
Sorry, just say that bit again, I didn't quite hear that.
It's going to help Labour as well, isn't it, though, the most popular party among 16 and 17-year-olds?
Well, that's not a consideration for us. This is not about, you know, making some kind of advantage for the Labour Party. This is the right thing to do. And it's also about making sure that people vote for longer through their lives and we get more people voting, because we think it's really important that people are engaged in the political process and actually do take the time to vote. And there's a lot of evidence that if you can capture young people when they're still at school and college, and all the education and discussion that goes around that at election times, get them into the habit early of voting, there's a lot of evidence that shows that they will continue to vote at higher levels throughout the subsequent years. And so this is also part of what we are also announcing today in the election strategy, about engaging more people in the democratic process and getting more people able to vote and casting their votes and feeling it's important.
I said about Labour being the most popular party among 16 and 17-year-olds, and I was quite interested to see the second most popular party is Reform. And, you know, that's before you unleash, you know, targeted political ads on young people after this change. You know, we've all seen how, you know, influential Nigel Farage has become on TikTok. Could this actually end up backfiring on you politically, do you think?
Well, look, it's for all of us. I mean, I wouldn't go off the sort of polling at any one snapshot in time. You know, polls go up and down, as we have seen over recent months. But you know, this is going to make the political parties, all political parties and politicians, think about what are the hopes and aspirations and the kind of policies that young people want to see. And it's going to make all of us, I'm sure, reflect that better. But I mean, it's not a huge number of people in that sense. It would be about 1.5 at most, 1.2 million young people who will be eligible to vote, and probably would be a lower number who would actually vote in an election. But we think it's really important in of itself as a principle. It's important to get people engaged in politics early and getting into the habit of voting early. And we think it's really important for our political debate and our democracy that young people's opinions are campaigned for.
Now, you're here, officially to talk about the laws that you introduced in the last year. I mean, that's quite a ballsy move, isn't it, after you failed to get your flagship welfare policy through?
Well, look, we took time. All our bills that we have passed, and we've passed many already. I think we've passed 21 bills so far in this parliamentary session, and many more that are just at the cusp of being passed in the coming weeks. I'm a great believer in our parliamentary democracy. I am the leader of the House of Commons. We don't do things in this country by executive order and then just a command paper and expect them to be laws. Everything has to meet the test of Parliament, and that is a tough test, and that's absolutely as it should be. And anything that we're putting forward from a legislation point of view will go through that tough test of Parliament and scrutiny. And that's why we take on board what parliamentarians say, and we adapt our bills accordingly. And I can't think of a single bill that we've passed in this last year that hasn't been made better by going through a tough parliamentary process.
You talked there about the importance of the tough parliamentary process, and Keir Starmer decided to suspend the whip from 4 Labour MPs for their role, amongst other things, in that welfare bill. How does that work out?
Well, just be really clear, these are matters for the Chief Whip to consider, and it's his decision about taking.
What do you think, though?
From people. But just be really clear that the 4 Labour MPs who have had the whip removed, which is a very, very serious thing to happen, and we want a united Labour team in Parliament. No one wants to take the whip off anyone. This was about a pattern of behaviour and persistent campaigning and activity against the Labour government, and we have to look at those things in the round, and that's why this decision has been taken by the Chief Whip, who's now going to look at it in more detail, and he's also going to be talking to those MPs, and as we did with some MPs this time last year over a vote, the whip, there is a route back for people, and people can get the whip returned if they in the future support the Labour government.
Now that there is also talk of a significant cabinet reshuffle in the autumn, and look, this is always a bit awkward, but your name has come up in some of the reports. It does feel like someone somewhere is maybe briefing against you. How does that make you feel?
Well, I didn't really know that people were briefing against me, so that's news to me. But look, no, that's fine. Yeah, good luck to them for that. But look, I'm doing a job that I'm really pleased to be doing as leader of the House of Commons for the Prime Minister. I'm working hard to make sure that our legislation gets through the House of Commons. I'm also working hard on trying to modernise and raise standards in the House of Commons, and I've got many aspects to the job that I do. Of course, whether I stay in this job or I'm moved is a matter for the Prime Minister, but I'm really not here to comment or discuss sort of reshuffle speculation.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a cheeky question, I get that. The 3 names, I have to say, reported as all being at risk are all women. Yourself, Bridget Phillipson, Lisa Nandy. It doesn't exactly help, accusations that there's a bit of a macho culture in Number 10, does it?
Look, all I would say is that, I've had times in recent weeks where I've needed the support of people in Number 10 when things have happened in a way that I wouldn't have wanted them to happen. And I've had nothing but total support from those in number 10. And there are many, I can reassure you, many strong women working at the heart of our government. And we are all working together to the same ends, women and men, and women and men in government, and that's what we're focused on.
Yeah, those are the two, tends to be. Lucy, thank you very much. Lucy Powell there, always good to have you on the programme. Thank you. All right, let's chat to Salma and Caroline, shall we? So she's there to kind of, defend, I guess, the government's legislative record after a year. How do you think Labour are getting on?
No, I think they've done some good things in the last year. I think some of the work they've done on looking at planning reform is a good example of that, and other areas. But they've hit some posts along the way which they should have seen coming. And as I said before, welfare reform is always going to be difficult for the Parliamentary Labour Party. We had similar rows under Tony Blair. He took a slightly different reaction to the rebels in those situations. The key issue is, do you get your legislation through? And I think, they should have foreseen some of the problems. They should have spent a bit more time, if possible, on convincing people of the reason why things had to change and therefore a planned way to do it. And the fact that they had this flagship piece of legislation, and I do feel for Liz Kendall in all this, and it's been filleted to get a final product which is way from what they really wanted, it is a sad end to the year, I think.
Salma?
I think it's quite surprising that in the first year of a Labour government, that came in with this huge, strong and great big majority, that Lucy Powell isn't able to really kind of sell a message. She's able to say that this is what we're working on, this is how things are going to be better, and really reference it, really talk about planning or housing or any of the things that they're doing. And I think it is this low energy that's going to sort of carry on haunting them all the way through this parliamentary term. And it's going to be very hard, even with a reshuffle, that she seemed a little bit sheepish about in terms of her own position, but even with a big reshuffle, is it going to have that energy and that momentum taking it forward?
It's always awkward asking those questions. It did feel a bit like, head in hands, but got to ask. I tried to do it in a friendly way, anyway.
Yeah, that's the worst type of question. They're smiling at you as they're asking that question.
Thanks very much. Now let's talk shall we, about the possibility of another junior doctors' strike, or resident doctors, as they're now known, because this afternoon the British Medical Association have been having further talks with the government. The 5-day walkout is currently scheduled for later this month, but the BMA did speak after the talks. This is what they said.
We have a very small window of opportunity over the next few days to avert strike action. The talks today have been constructive, and they're a first step. It was a very high-level discussion, and we're looking forward to more discussions to hopefully avert the strike action. No one wants strikes, patients don't want strikes, we don't want strikes, and the government doesn't want strikes. So hopefully the next few days will be very, very useful.
Well, our health correspondent Ashish Joshi joins us now. What do we reckon then? Strikes on, strikes off? Too early to tell?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I think
Sorry.
I'll tell you exactly what I think is going to happen. I think that's really positive. Wes Streeting said exactly the same thing after the talks. He will move heaven and earth to avert these strikes. He can't afford the resident doctors to go on strike. They don't have the public support they did the last time round. They're saying that neither side wants industrial action. The patients will suffer. Wes Streeting has got a 10-year plan. The first thing he did when he came in as the health minister was resolve the dispute, which had lasted for a year, cost the NHS millions, tens of millions of pounds, patients suffering, some patients dying. He can't afford to have 5 days of strike action beginning next Friday. He will do everything he can. The problem is, Sophie, he doesn't have the money. They want more money. They want a redress of their pay scale. That's not going to happen. So he's got to find another way. Some reports in the papers today talking about student loans being written off. Perhaps that's a way around. But they, over the next few days, tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, before next Friday, they will have to find a way that the student doctors, the resident doctors can walk away and say, look, we have what we wanted. We've got a revision of our pay scales. Wes Streeting can say, I've resolved another potential dispute and I want to plough on with my 10-year plan and make sure no more patients suffer. I can't see this strike happening, but
Yeah,
who knows? Who knows next Friday?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes these things just go the wrong way without anyone kind of meaning to. But it's interesting, you're right about how important it is for the government.
It's crucial, it's crucial. 10-year plan is not going to happen. The waiting list will rise again.
Yeah.
You just can't have resident doctors walking out on the street.
And I'll be honest, like the health service is one of the things that they are pointing to in these interviews with people like me as something where they've made a bit of progress as well, so it can't go.
It was in the manifesto. They're bringing down the waiting list.
Exactly.
And they can't do that if resident doctors go out on strike.
Samuel, what's your take on all this? Have you got any sympathy with the doctors or with the government? Or
I think there's a bit of a worry here because it's a little bit like going back to Labour rebels, is that once you concede certain points, you know, are you going to see more industrial action coming forward, perhaps not just within the NHS, but in other areas? So I think there's always going to be that dilemma for Labour, particularly, who are often seen as, you know, close to the unions and have certainly better relationships than the Conservatives historically with the unions. I do think that if you were writing off loans for doctors, then you are creating a big problem for the student loan company. So it's not as if you're resolving something, you're pushing it somewhere else into government. And the student loans company is going to be overseen by Bridget Phillipson in education, I believe. I don't think it still sits in biz when it did when I was there. So it would be interesting to see how that conversation goes as well, to see whether it is actually feasible.
It's difficult, isn't it, once you start writing off student loans for certain public sector workers and not for others? Like, are you creating a hierarchy? Like, what about nurses? What about teachers?
Right.
What do you think public opinion is?
Well, as has been said, the public opinion has moved quite considerably in terms of junior, now resident doctors. The first dispute that went through, which obviously the Labour government, Wes Streeting, sort of sorted out by giving them a pay rise, you know, public, I think, were pretty much in support. It's the dial has gone completely the other way. And I think that sits alongside sort of the general feelings about the public, about worry. They still want the NHS, but really worried about whether it can deliver. And, you know, the government, through a number of different actions, has managed to squeeze out an extra, I think, 4 million appointments this last year. But, you know, there's still some big issues for the health service to face. Now, on this, if we go back to what the resident doctors talk about when their pay levels were before the financial crash in 2008, you know, they're right. You know, in terms of the value of their pay, it's higher than it is now. But to be honest, that's the same for a lot of other public sector workers, teachers, you know, firefighters, police officers, let alone people in the private sector who at certain levels, maybe not at the top level of things, but certainly at other levels working in the private sector, in small businesses elsewhere, have seen their wages be depressed ever since that time. They're never going to see that catch up to where it was before 2008. So I think there's a balance here and a reality here. If they can do something, it's interesting what you said about the student loans, someone's going to have to pay for that somewhere. The other issue that's been picked up on is about pensions, about whether there's something about pension. Now, whether these younger doctors are agree-minded about a pension thing, well, I'm way off that happening. It'll be very happy for older doctors if something more is done on that. But again, they're looking for a way out because their last thing they need, even with 5 days, it's amazing how even 5 days of action can stall appointments. It's massive.
It will have a huge impact.
What kind of impact will it have?
It will have impacts on waiting lists. What they'll do is they will try and rearrange all of these appointments. So they have to be kicked further down the line. Somebody who's been waiting for months for an appointment will be told by letter or by phone, sorry, we can't see you, but we'll give you another appointment maybe in 6 months' time. So those patients will still have to be seen, but then those patients present and they're in a worse condition and they spend more time in hospital, they need more treatment. So it's just a mess for all of the people involved.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
And there isn't a budget to hire in doctors, you know, to give people overtime, the consultants overtime, because they're already overstretched anyway.
Really interesting chat, and thanks for sticking your neck out earlier, Ashish, on whether the strikes will happen.
We'll see what happens next Friday. I might regret it, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Always good to have you on as well. Right, now, finally, Donald Trump is famously a big fan of Coca-Cola, and he now says the soft drinks giant is changing its recipe for the better. Writing on social media, the president said, I've been speaking to Coca-Cola about using real cane sugar in Coke in the United States, and they've agreed to do so. I'd like to thank all of those in authority at Coca-Cola. This will be a very good move for them. You'll see, it's just better. Well, here's a president meeting with Coca-Cola's chief executive earlier this year. There you go. The soft drinks giant has thanked him, apparently, for his enthusiasm for the drink, but it hasn't yet confirmed any change to its recipe. Well, of course, Trump loves Coca-Cola so much he reportedly drinks 12 a day. And he has a red Diet Coke button reinstalled in his office so that he can just order them from his desk. He'll press the button, and there it comes. Right, let's chat to Salma and Caroline. And actually, you're still here as well.
As a health correspondent, I tell you, that's bad for you.
12 a day.
I'll stick my neck out. I'll say that's really bad for you, but that could explain a lot.
But switching real cane sugar is probably better than...
Anything that makes any product sweeter contains sugar. It's bad.
OK, there you go. That is the final word that everyone used.
So Lord Charlie Faulkner, I'm gonna out him on this, but basically I think when we were in the Shadow Cabinet together on Dave Miliband, he was on some fad diet, which was Coca-Cola and apples. I think it was a male thing.
Really?
I don't know. I don't know if any viewers know about this, but there was a thing at the time around this cans of Coke and apples.
The health
it was a
correspondent
thing.
here is like
and he would come into
the apple's great.
the can of Coke and an apple to lose weight.
But really? But the reality is, Trump is being driven by something that's interesting. So you have, his RFK Jr., who is one of his appointees and has very successfully talked about pharma being in food. And it's something that, even though he's an anti-vaxxer and there's lots of kind of, very odd views of his, one of the things that has been very popular is this idea of kind of changing recipes and big food and big food and drink sort of stepping up to its responsibilities. Whether, it's just a taste thing in relation to Donald Trump, I don't know. I used to love Coca-Cola. It was my favourite drink, with also mixed in with alcohol.
Coca-Cola, what stopped you drinking?
Because I read a World Health Organization report around some of the impacts of not just the sugar.
So you stopped because you thought it was bad for you?
Because I stopped because I thought it was bad for me. And also, when I was in government, we brought in a sugar tax to try and encourage people to change their recipes.
Isn't there a hack to use Coca-Cola for cleaning your toilet?
I mean, if that's what it does, then think about
I'm sorry to lower the tone, but I'm sure I heard that
You're nobody unless you've tried masala Coke, though, which is Indian Coca-Cola. I talk about Mexican Coke and British Coke.
So if you had a red button on your desk that you could press and an item of food or drink arrived, what would you go for?
A really healthy smoothie,
now. A smoothie?
A kale smoothie, yeah. Maybe with some ginger and turmeric.
Not one that I would push 12 times a day, certainly, but if there was kind of like an emergency button, if I was having a really bad day, I would like a St John's custard donut.
Oh, that's great. Oh, my God.
Toasted. But you'd have to, break the glass.
Afternoon toasted tea cake and a builder's tea. That's my go-to.
Do you know what? And you're going to have to close your ears. I'm obsessed at the minute with cheese strings. I love a cheese
strings.
That's never seen a cow.
Right. Okay. Lots of very important debate on the Politics Hub this evening. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
He's not going to come back in here again, is he? And thanks both as well, as always. That is it from us for this week. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah J. Mead. Then, of course, at 9 p.m, you've got Anna Botting on The World with Elder Hakeem. But we will see you on Monday. Have a good Friday and a good rest of your weekend as well.